Hey everyone, Zaraz here from Out Casuals. Today I want to talk about hero investment priorities. So when you're playing Call of Dragon, if you are at the beginning of the game, if you're a low spender, medium spender, free to play, and you are starting or you started recently and you're not sure what hero to invest in, because it is obviously going to become more and more confusing as more heroes come out. So today I want to talk about basically the top 3 pairs that you should really be focusing on in terms of investment, because they will bring you the most amount of merit and rewards to your account, and which hero used to be really good but can now kind of be skipped considering new heroes that have come out. So first we'll talk about what unit you should focus on. Of course, in 95% of cases, all players who are not spending a lot of money in this game should be focusing mostly on mage units and mage heroes, as they are obviously going to be the easiest one to have a decent time with and make a lot of merit. They have the longest range in the game and they have the most AoE of any types of units in the game, which means you'll do a lot of damage to enemies and around them, and that gives you free merit because the AoE is not counter-attackable, which will just end up giving you more merit for the amount of healing that you're gonna have to do. Now, this, of course, works with Lilia, who has obviously is a pay-to-win hero. You do need to purchase her, but it is basically the highest value investment you can make. If you're spending any money, she is going to be very worth it. And she still works really well, even if you don't max her. If you just get her first kill at 5, it does a lot of damage. And she works, obviously, with Velen. So this, in terms of gameplay, hasn't really changed, because these are obviously something you can purchase, and Velen comes from the gold keys, which means you will be able to max him out if you play a long enough time. And he is also very variable, even with his first few skills unlocked, at least his first 2 in my opinion, who are the best ones. This is going to be, in my opinion, the #1 pair that you really will want to get, not because you need to invest everything you have into them, but because having them on the field will give you the most amount of value for the lowest amount of investment, even if they're not as strong or maxed out. Obviously, maxed out is still going to be a very high priority. Now, in terms of what other march you could work on, will be, of course, Marksman. We can't really ignore Marksman. There's 2 ways you can go here. Make your account fully mage focus, and then you'll be trying to basically just wait until every mage. You could do Bertrand, Tohar, but this is a high investment pair that works amazingly well and still does just as much merit as my Lilia Velen, even if they don't AoE. But they require most of their kit to be maxed in order to really get that same value, while Lilia Velen will do very well without that. But really, the reason I'm saying Marksman is, of course, because you'll be leveling up a lot of unit at once. You're not going to be maxing out just one unit in the game. Of course, you will be focusing most of your speed ups in some area, but every day you're going to get more ballista and more vestals and more mages and all that kind of stuff. So you will eventually build up armies of every troop type. So it's nice to have some heroes to represent every troop type. In my case, I run 3 mages, 1 marksman and 1 infantry march right now, and it works pretty well for my account. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I would usually recommend most people just go full out mages unless you're a medium or higher spender. And then you can obviously do very much of work with marksman. But the new pair, Zayda and Maggrat, is so damn overpowered that I would say that other than Lily Velen, there is no higher investment in the game that you should be doing. Now, of course, this is a G3 pair, so not everybody's going to have access to it at the beginning of the game. And it is going to be also hard to save because you can't save G3 token until you're in G3 season. But this Maggrat is only going to be requiring 5551 in order to be amazing, which means the investment is much lower than a max hero. It's almost 300 tokens less. So it's like 690 to max it out, and it's like 390 to get the first 3 skill max. So this is why it's so amazing. It is really going to be one of your highest priority, because this is going to be the printing merit march that you'll ever see. And then obviously Zayda is on the wheel, which you'll see a lot and you'll be able to get for a decent investment, as well as over time. You'll be able to get her from many different sources. And she is obviously best at max awakened, but she does work very well with, like me, for example, 5333. She's still very, very decent at that point. So this is another pair that you will not need to be maxed. It will not require you to spend every single ounce of money and tokens you have, and you will be getting amazing result. So in my opinion, Zayda Maggrat and Lily Velen will be your 2 main marches right now in the game that are going to be absolutely incredible and will get you the most amount of merit and anything else in the game. Now for the next priority, once you've had these 2 marches and you've done really good work, or you have a lot of troops, you can bring a 3rd or 4th marches in PvP. You will be looking, as I said, Bertrand, Tohar, amazing march. They do just as much merit as my Lilia villain, even though they're all max. It's incredible because they nuke so hard that they melt enemies. If you target the right enemies, weak archers or weak mages in the back line, you will instantly obliterate them and get tons of merit. So it's a nuking march and it does really well also against infantry, thanks to Tohar's anti-counterattack and all that kind of stuff. But Tohar basically gains, I would say, maybe 30% of his power from his Awaken alone. His Awaken is huge, it's amazing, and it does give a lot of buff, and it's something you don't get at all without the Awakening. And of course, he does also have one of his skills that is a garrison skill, so the other 2 skills, this one being the most important. It's really hard to get 5-1, 5-1. You know, you kind of want that if you can, and that's where you get most of your power, but then by awakening him, you do get a lot more power. So he's a really strong hero, but he requires a lot of investment, a full 690 token to really shine. And Bertrand requires really just his first 2 skills, now that they've buffed him because of his talent. This compound interest is now triggered by this talent, so he is now better than he ever was. He is amazing. He doesn't need anyone to make his compound interest work. He can work with Lilia, he can work with Velen, he can work with Tia flying, he can work with Aetius. So he is a very versatile hero. You can max him if you want to use humans, focus on mages, and have flying, and ignore Tohar. In that case, you'll have a flying march and a ground march with Lilia Velen. So Bertrand would be one of my high recommend in terms of investment in the game. He is G2 as well, so you don't have to invest in every G2 hero, so it is going to be something that works well for you. And he is going to, as I said, work with basically anyone else that is a mage, so it is a very safe investment. Now, if you are a little bit more of a spender, or if you are really interested in marksman, you can go the marksman route after you have a solid mage and a solid marksman in the Zayda Maggrat. There is no question, Zayda Maggrat should be your first priority if you have access to them. But in the next level of priority, obviously we have our Syndrion here. Syndrion Ffraegar is obviously an absolute epic march. It was the best march in the game for a long time before they got replaced basically by Maggrat and Zayda. Now, Syndrion still works really well with both Maggrat and Zayda, so if you have a very max Syndrion, you can invest in only one of the 2. I would maybe go with Zayda, but Maggrat is also pretty powerful. It depends on what you're looking for in your gameplay, but you don't have to get both of them. You can do Syndrion with one of them, for example, and that still is a very solid march. Otherwise, of course, you know, Ffraegar will be your go-to choice as your second investment. So you could do one mage march and then go for the other 2 being marksman march, and then you'd have a Syndrion Ffraegar, a Maggrat Zayda, and then one mage march that you would be very powerful with. That would be the optimal scenario. Now, other marksmen, of course, is often underwhelmed because it doesn't really get good until it's max, but Kinnara and Nico, they are, in my opinion, on a very close, if not better level than Syndrion Ffraegar in the open field for PvP, just because of the fact that they nuke so hard, and when you have your Nico max, you get basically a 200 physical damage factor on almost every hit that you do. It does add up very much, and it is absolutely great. On top of having 1400 damage here and having your Kinnara who also does 1400 damage here. And the reason why I say it's better than Syndrion Ffraegar is not just because you're going to get more merit. It's very close. You get pretty much the same amount of merit with both marches in my experience, but you do need Nico expertise for this march to really work well. And Kinnara expertise also works really well, and you kind of need it for it to work. So these are very high investment marches, but they are G1 marches, so you can do from the beginning. You will never be wasteful if you do max these 2. Of course, Nico comes from the golden key, so I wouldn't recommend spending a lot of these tokens on it. Just try and be patient. But the reason this march is, in my opinion, so strong is, of course, this debuff that she inflicts. So when she does damage to target legion with her skill, she gives them less 15% damage for 5 seconds. This is amazing. It's like absolutely amazing. It does a huge amount of debuff. 15% damage is huge. If you target enemy mages, which you should because you're going to melt them, you're going to significantly hinder their damage done. And many people using Kinnara in the field will be very strong as a team, making the enemy ball a lot less strong because of that. So this is a very valuable march to invest in. But if you're in Season 3 and you haven't invested them in, you know, you would most likely want to focus your time and token on Zayda and Maggrat and maybe Syndrion and Ffraegar, or, you know, at least one of these marches they will still perform better in general just because they're not requiring everything to be maxed to perform super well, as opposed to Nico and Kinnara, who kind of require to be maxed. So this is my opinion, the kind of investment order. Now you obviously have also flying units such as Tia and Ffraegar. If you want to do flying archers, I would recommend against it. It's really niche and doesn't work very well most of the time. But in terms of flying unit, Tia is obviously one of those amazing one. She works really well with Bertrand, but if you don't have Bertrand invested in, she works still well with Aetius. But as a flying march, Aetius, Tia, there's nothing wrong with them, but they don't do that much damage. They're not big of a threat. They do good support. They do help your team. If you have this, you do shield your team. And then, of course, if you have the Visit of the Sanctus, it becomes a really strong march. But the Visit of the Sanctus is obviously a well kind of item and requires levels to be amazing. So it depends on what you have. I would not advise in investing in these. You'll see mine is maxed out without spending tokens. I did do the daily a little bit on her, but over time, having played over a year, you get her from the golden keys and you don't need her to be maxed to work well. So I would not recommend investing in them, but it is still nice to have them around and use them depending on what combos you're doing. Now, the last investment priority that I would talk about would be obviously infantry. Now, this is not a question. It is almost a must at this point that everyone use at least one infantry march. Goresh Kogol is obviously the best in the game. It is amazing. It's tanky. It has a lot of movement speed thanks to Skogul, as well as the charge that they get. And when you get seasoned talent, they get a lot of stuff there as well that makes them tanky. And now that the infantry has been buffed to take 40% less damage from ranged troops, they are really a powerhouse in this game. 5-1-1-1 and 5-1-1-1 do work really well on them. I would still say 5-5-1-1 and 5-5-1-1 would be the minimum investment to have them usable. But at that point, they're still very decent. They really don't need to be maxed to get a good amount of work done. And really, as any player in the game, it's just nice to have one infantry march to defend your other march when you're marching around from calves and stuff like that. And it really is required now from every player to have at least one infantry march. So if you can invest those 5-5-1-1 Goresh Kogul, you'll do very well as well. If you are limited in how much you can invest, you can also obviously use Madeline or Garwood. Garwood goes well with Madeline, or Madeline goes well with Goresh. Goresh Garwood, Goresh Madeline, they all work. Even Skogul Madeline, these are all workable like infantry. And if you're not going to be main infantry, you're going to do good work with that. So it really depends on your luck. If your Garwood has gotten a lot of gold key and he's really high up, sure, use him. If you were at the beginning of the game, you invested in Madeline, made her 5-5-1-1 or 5-5-5-1 or whatever you did with her, then use her. It just depends on what you have. It doesn't really matter. If you're not a whale, your infantry is going to be more of a tank than a merit printer. So use the best that you can. I would say Goresh and Madeline, in my opinion, are the two highest investment out of Season 1 and basically Season 2 heroes. If you're already in Season 2 or 3, then just skip Madeline and just do Goresh Kogul. If you can only do one of them, like I would do Goresh and then Madeline or Garwood as the secondary. This would be how I would prioritize. So one super strong mage march, which obviously is often going to be Lilia related. One super strong marksman march, which is going to be Zayda Maggrat or Syndrion, depending on how far you are in the game, or even Kinnara Nico if you have them maxed. And then you go back to a third march, which would be another marksman or another mage, which could be flying with Bertrand Tea or Bertrand Tohar. Or it could be another marksman march if you're gonna have, Maggrat Zayda as well as Kinnara Nico or Syndrion Ffraegar. And then an infantry march would be the next priority in my opinion, and that should be Goresh Madeline or Goresh Kogul, depending on what you have, and even Garwood could work in there. Now the last thing I want to touch on, I haven't really talked about calves. Calves in the state of the game currently, they're just not really relevant. They work well for some whales who will attack reinforcement lines or gatherers and stuff like that. But in terms of PvP battle, unless you're a high spending player or a whale, you will not really get much benefit from cavalry at all. It is a very niche types of unit. So it's not recommended. There is so much more to be given to your account through other unit types that it's not like they're totally bad. They're just not worth the investment. So I would just not do anything with calves unless you are going to be spending a lot of money, because you're going to be taking a lot of your power, putting it into cav, and then not be able to use calves majority of the time when you're fighting in open field. So lastly, really, when you go into G1, G2, G3, the one thing here that is different is that you sometimes get legendary hero tokens that do not have a G1, 2, or 3. These are obviously going to come from multiple different events that are not related to a season. As you can see, I have never spent one, and I have 579 from basically day one of the game from everything. This is from packs that you purchase, recharge rewards, things like that. A lot of the times they're not going to be associated to a season. And these are what's really important, because if you save them from the beginning of the game, of course, you'll get to a point where right now we're in Season 3, G3, and all the new heroes coming out are exceptionally overpowered. They're much stronger than their previous counterpart. We saw this with obviously Zayda and Maggrat being miles ahead in terms of power of basically Syndrion Ffraegar or any other March in the game. They're just so much stronger than everyone. So we are expecting that the next G3 heroes, which are Cavs, to be skipped for most people, but the next one Infantry and the next one Mages could be powerhouses that are much stronger than everything before. And same if you're in G1 and you want to save for Maggrat and Zayda when you do get to G3, well, it's really good if you could save these tokens as long as possible, because when you do invest them, the season that you're going to be in, you're going to have a huge power spike, because you're going to have strongest heroes available in the game currently, which are going to be much stronger than before. So this is just something to look out for. Obviously, G1, G2, G3 have no point in the game other than to be spent on their respective hero, but the G0 or the non-G, basically these ones are universals and should be prioritized in terms of saving, and in terms of saving them for hero that really matter. Do not use these on G1 or G2 heroes if you can avoid it. Let me know what you think about the investment list. What is your priority in the game currently investing in for your account? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.